Welcome to episode 31 of the Minds Capital podcast, the show devoted to the growing world of independent sponsorship and entrepreneurial private equity. I'm Will Smith, here with my partners in Minds Capital, Nicholas James and Max Lummis. Today's conversation is with Nathan Chandrasekaran of Columbia River Partners. Max, what did you think of our conversation with Nathan?
This was a very dense episode with lots of great information, and probably one that you should listen to on maybe like 0.75x speed, just because there's so much happening here. Just really full of info, and I learned a lot. I can relate to a lot of the things that he said. My favorite thing that he said was that he values long-term relationships with his vendors, including his QV providers. He sees that it's important to have a mutually beneficial good relationship. And it definitely is, because, you build these relationships with clients and vendors, and they can last over many years. And, there can be good deals, there can be bad deals, there can be deal breaks. I think it's, how do you work with one another, and how do you preserve that relationship? How do you get your vendor to go the extra mile while you treat them good, and, one hand washes the other. So that was a good point, but you might miss it if you don't listen to it at 0.75x speed. I was really interested in what he had to say about carve-outs. 4 of his deals have been carve-outs, which from a CPA standpoint, we typically don't like those from a QOV standpoint, because the financials are not definitive. The carved out business does not have its own bank statements. It's just very hard with reasonable certainty to come to a conclusion on a QOV for a carve out, just because there's just not a lot of data available. So you're relying on assumptions, and you can get kind of within a reasonable range in terms of what is adjusted EBITDA for this carve out, which is missing expenses and might not have. There may be corporate overhead allocations, things like that. It's not a standalone business, so it presents a lot of problems. Now, that being said, I really like carve-outs from an investment standpoint if it's the right buyer. And in this case, he's been the right buyer, it sounds like 4 times. Carve-outs are often very undervalued because they're sort of neglected, if you will, by the parent company. They're typically being spun off by a parent company for some reason. It could be regulatory, it could be, change in ownership. It could just be whatever reason this business has decided to divest this carved out segment. So it's not a highly valued asset, and it's often available on the cheap, quite frankly. There's operational inefficiencies often within these carved out units because they've been neglected. They haven't been doing outbound marketing in some cases. They don't have, salespeople. They're just kind of coasting along, but oftentimes they've got a really good team that's really good at what they do. They just need to be in a better home. So there's a lot of room for multiple arbitrage with carve-outs from an investment standpoint. You can buy low, fix it up, sell high. I mean, it's like the perfect formula for the right independent sponsor. But that sponsor or that buyer needs to probably have an existing platform that carve-out can be plugged into. So for that reason, there's also not as many buyers out there, again, sort of pushing down the value of this asset and making it very attractive from an acquisition standpoint. Another quick thing, Nathan and his group started off as independent sponsors, no platforms. They started from scratch. They had limited funds. So they quickly outsourced their first associate from India. Swati, I believe was her name. So Nathan talks about the process of, working with an Indian subcontractor and the time and effort that it takes to build a relationship and integrate, an offshore resource into your team. I have a lot of experience with that at LCS. It's very challenging, but often very rewarding. So, you have calls with that person every night at 9:00 or every morning at 7 or 8 a.m. because of the crazy time change, 11 or 12 hours. You never are physically together. You still have to figure out how to build a relationship with that individual and incorporate them into the team and make them feel like they are a part of the team, because at the end of the day, they are, but they're very, very far away and very removed from the operation. So that worked out really well for Nathan and his group, although it sounds like now they're more focused on hiring staff in the US, which I think is very reasonable. But again, those are just 2 points that I picked up on, but the episode is absolutely full of great tips, great information, a lot of great tips for new independent sponsors in particular.
Yeah, I thought his recounting of his experience hiring and integrating, as you said, and training Swati over years and how integral to the organization she's become was really kind of a playbook that sponsors or aspiring sponsors listening should study if they think about hiring an offshore resource and how much training is going to be involved and how seriously to treat that. They treated it very, very seriously, invested a lot of their own time in it, but it has been really, really worthwhile. I'll also call out for maybe the folks early in their sponsorship career listening, Nathan's talking about the first years of becoming an independent sponsor, the 2 years of the search, getting the first acquisition, the fees from your first acquisition. Do you reinvest them or into your business, or do you start paying yourself because you haven't for 2 years? And then getting to maybe the second acquisition and how there starts to be some oxygen in the firm. That whole kind of trajectory and what that really looks like, and how you're really getting by the skin of your teeth for years it was just a really valuable window into how hard it is to get started as an independent sponsor firm. So I really appreciated him taking us through, year 1, 2, 3, and 4, acquisition 1 and 2. Second, that it was just a phenomenal interview with Nathan. So thank you, Nathan, for bringing so much energy. Nicholas, I know you agreed.
Yeah, I certainly agreed with that. And it was good to get his layout of what the first few years can look like when it comes to cash flow. But I also wanted to insert an apology here. I talk very slowly, and for those of you who followed Max's recommendation to be on 0.75x, this must be very painful. I promise I speak a lot faster in Norwegian and more animated as well. As far as Nathan... I was swept away by him. He provides so much nuance and perspective on the independent sponsor model, on entrepreneurship, on operations. And so this was just one of those episodes where I learned so much. One of the things that he discussed, I think we get to it at the very end, is how for institutionals and for family office principals, they invest other people's money. And so for them, when they allocate, they prefer to allocate to proven asset classes, to safe investments. As he says, it's a lot safer for a family office principal to invest in Blackstone or S&P 500 and hope for a double-digit return, 10, 12, 15% IRR, than it is to seek 25 or 30% by investing in direct deals or independent sponsors. And so he talks about how this has been a barrier historically from capital markets coming into the independent sponsor land. But he also talks about how this is changing. There is more trust, more legitimacy, more credibility in the independent sponsor model. And so increasingly these barriers are coming down. And so that's why you're seeing more and more capital coming into the independent sponsor market, which is now not only supporting more independent sponsors and more independent sponsor deals, but also much, much larger deals. Some deals which has been in the hundreds of millions of dollars enterprise value range. So this is an evolution that he pinpoints very nicely by attributing that safety factor. Amazing conversation. Thank you, Nathan.
He had that other point about the new capital, that he only will work with capital providers who are committed to the independent sponsor ecosystem. And that was his reasoning for that was pretty interesting, which is he had a deal yanked from him from Columbia River. They'd invested a lot of resources in this deal. They were very near the finish line, and the capital provider yanked it from them. at the last minute, very painfully. It took him months, a year, I think he said, to recover psychically from that. But his point is about only working with capital providers that are in the that are very active and kind of vocally committed to the independent sponsor space, because the independent sponsor space talks to itself a lot. It's a small world, and reputation travels. And so if a capital provider is not committed to the space, they might not have a reputation, or they're in and out, and they don't care about the reputation. Those who are committed to this category, to this asset class, will care about their reputation, which will help self-regulate, self-police, and you won't end up doing business with bad actors, like unfortunately happened to Nathan. Pretty interesting.
Actually, on that, I know we're going long here, but one of the deals we recently committed to, I got an email from the sponsor last week that things are slowing down because their main capital provider is retrading them in the last minute. And so he's looking now for a plan B. And I now know the name of that player that is retrading them. I won't necessarily say it on air, but I will certainly keep it in the back of my head when I hear other sponsors mention them in the future. So to your point, word travels fast in this ecosystem, and you're doing yourself a future disservice if you don't treat people correctly.
Yeah. Great call out. Before we get to Nathan, a reminder that Minds Capital is actively investing in independent sponsor deals. So if you're a sponsor and are raising for a deal for an acquisition, submit it to us, please. deal@mindscapital.co. And if you're interested in investing in Minds Capital as an LP, we have a pre-registration form on our website for accredited investors. So if you are that, you can fill out that form to be kept in the loop on our future raises, one of which is right around the corner, Fund 2. We are seeing the subscription numbers be very strong. We're looking at being oversubscribed, which of course we're thrilled about. But still fill out that form if you're interested. Maybe not in Fund 2, but Fund 3, it's mindscapital.co. And here is episode 31 of the Minds Capital podcast with Nathan Chandrasekaran of Columbia River Partners. Enjoy. Welcome to the Minds Capital Podcast, your connection to the growing world of independent sponsors and entrepreneurial private equity. We are your hosts, Will Smith and Nicholas James. Nathan Chandrasekaran is based in Seattle and leads Columbia River Partners, an independent sponsor firm that has completed 15 acquisitions across 7 platforms since 2020. Nathan spent 12 years in PE on Wall Street and in Washington State, and his co-founder, Puneet, brings VC and family office experience to the table. Columbia River has a team of 8, including a couple of fully integrated team members in India. We're going to hear about that. Nathan, welcome to the Minds Capital Podcast.
Thanks for having me, guys. Thanks, Will. Thanks, Nicholas.
So on our pre-call, Nathan, you had said that I wouldn't actually be a good fit for the team. I didn't take it personally, but go ahead and tell us why you said that.
Yeah, so I think the reference was when we interview candidates, we talk about our first hire was a woman in India, Swati, who's awesome. And, she works her daytime, our nighttime. And to get her fully integrated, we will have calls with her quite often at 9 o'clock our time. All right, so it's me, Puneet, and Swati, 3 of us at 9 p.m. for about a half hour, just to kind of quickly go through what she's got to get done, right? So by the time she gets into her evening, our morning, we've got what we need. And what we've learned over the years, and Puneet and I are both Indian, like you get more from the folks in India when you integrate them as part of your team and you give them more guidance. So we had, nightly calls at 9 p.m. Now, Puneet and I are a little older. Our wives are not as like, hey, you got to spend time with us, right? It's a little easier. All right, they're doing their calls. So you're like, I can't do that well. I'm like, great.
Yeah.
If you're like, look, my dad was a physician and he worked 24/7. He was on call every night, every day.
Yeah.
My wife's family runs hotels. They're on call 24/7. They get up at 3 a.m. at the night. So if if we can't spend a half hour at night just to get our team in track, then this is not the business for you. Because private equity, like, it's not a 9-to-5 job. So that's why I made a joke that, well, you're not for us, because it's not, the extra effort is what we're looking for. No offense.
Yeah. Well, in my defense, I think it was a little bit of a miscommunication, but we still all take the point that this is an all hours and work very hard career.
Yeah, we work hard and play hard. Like, don't get me wrong. I coach a lot and I do a lot of it with my kids, but like, we do, we work quite a bit too. So,
and it should be said, Nathan, actually, that you go home relatively early, have the family time for a chunk, right? And then return to work. What does that look like? What do those hours look like?
Yeah. So I'm usually, typical day, I'm up at 5 a.m., do a couple emails, go work out at 6, in the office drop my kids off, come to the office by 8:30. I'm usually here till about 4. And then 4 to 6:37, I'm either coaching, driving, chauffeuring, taking calls during those times if I have to. And then I'm usually back online by 8:30, and I'm using an hour and a half of stuff getting done. This is Monday through Thursday typically, right? So I feel very fortunate that I get to do all that, because my dad, who was a doctor, had to be at the hospital all the time, and he was on call. Yeah. So I think of it as a privilege that I can work the way I do and still get to work out every day and see my kids. And if it's an extra half hour at night, so be it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I too feel that it is a privilege to be able to do what we do, and not just versus being a physician, but just being living in a rich country with all the opportunity around us. I just always feel like when I get a little complainy in my head, I'm like, are you kidding? This is what an incredible opportunity to be here in this moment at this time. Let's get after it.
But when we interview candidates, which we do a lot, we talk about this nightly calls we used to have and we want to read the person's reaction. Because if they're going to come into private equity, and if the first reason is why or what I have to do this, we quickly move on, right? Yeah. It's been a good, because you want the guys that have a chip on their shoulder, that are hungry, they're going to go the extra mile. And that's what our team's built around, right? And so it's actually been, it's not what we expected when we started, but it's been a helpful bar testing as we've expanded our team. Like, hey, this is what we do. So
yeah. So no, that's why you had the line. Then you won't be a good fit for us, right? Correct. Right there in your back pocket, because you've deployed it before.
100%. Yeah.
I think that line was related to, well, you're a morning person. You're up early every day and do a lot of emails before 6 a.m. So I think that's how it came into the mix here in your defense. And I think how this conversation came up, Nathan, is of course that you have fully integrated team members in India, which is X hours away from Seattle. And so you're not requiring them to move their daytime all that much, or you're compromising on your side as well. Right. And so one thing that you did for many years, you had a standing call at 9:30 or 9 o'clock at night in order to integrate them, make them feel like they were culturally involved. And I think that stands out, because most people who hire offshore labor will require it to be on their terms, their hours, and they frankly half-ass it a little bit and then don't probably get the returns that you're seeing.
100%.
100%. So what are the returns you're seeing from having a teammate?
We had two initially, and as we've built our team over in the US now, as we've got more fees, I can literally give our team in India a sim, and they could prepare a memo, a model, an investor deck, a lender deck that's almost 90% there, because we've trained them and spent time with them, and they will tell you they feel like they're part of our team. And they've worked for other firms before, where they just get an email, go do this, and they don't get there's no interaction. And part of why we've now got an office for our team in Seattle, it's to create more interaction. So they could just walk in my office and we could talk about, hey, I want to look at this deal this way or that way. So our team in India have the ability to literally pop a half hour on anyone's calendar at night if they need to review something with us. And they will stay up late their time. So they'll hop on a call at 8 a.m. our time in the morning. So it's late for them too. So it works both ways. Right, it's not just right. So they can pop on a half hour calendar with us, and vice versa. And they will also stay up super late, our early morning, and it's been a good symbiotic relationship.
And so, what are some of the tasks that you send in their directions now that they're fully trained and integrated?
So reviewing sims, doing a first draft of our models. I just had like last night, hey, one of our CEOs is going to a conference and he needed like a one pager. She drafted a fantastic one pager of what the business does and what CRP is. And she sent it directly to the CEO because she's worked with me for a couple of years now. So we get a lot of leverage, right? In terms of a lot of what I call the associate and analyst work. And she's even doing a little bit of VP work too, which is reviewing materials from other people. She didn't start that way, but those are the kinds of things that so she's really a full-fledged kind of senior associate VP of a typical private equity firm. She's doing all those tasks.
And the reason you're hiring someone in India, it's not only because you get someone to work while you're sleeping at night, but there's also a cost efficiency with it, right? So what would be a range if you were to hire offshore workers like that?
So look, let's be honest. She was our first hire when we had very little fee income, right? Like we didn't have a lot of fee income in the very beginning. Like I think we were getting maybe 10 grand a month. This was after our closed deal. And even then we're like, well, what do we do with that 10 grand? Do we take it out, take 5 grand a month? Like, what is that going to do? So we said, let's go find a resource. So initially we went through a third-party outsourcing firm, and it's about 70 to 80 grand a year, right? All in. And in top of that, you also get access to PitchBook and CapIQ and some of those databases within that resource too. So you get some of those if you use those. We don't use it as much. So it's a good versus hiring an associate here in the U.S. Now, going forward, we want to build a team in the U.S., right? It's easier for us. I don't want to have calls at 9:30 every night, but we've kept Swati, who has been with us since day one, and she's fantastic. So now we kind of owe it to her because she's put in the sweat and equity to be with us. And so, we're going to do both. We're going to hire, one-offs in India where it makes sense. We actually have somebody in the Philippines too, by the way, that does a lot of research on LinkedIn for us. And then we're building the core investment team, in Seattle.
Nathan, so it sounds like there was a service provider who specializes in financial roles because they bundled in PitchBook, et cetera.
Correct. And the way it works is like there's firms like Trevista and ValueServe, and the way they do is they have a whole bunch of financial analysts coming in. They start with working for the investment banks, like the big banks. And if you're really good, they get promoted to work in private equity groups. Now she went from working, I can't remember, maybe working for Credit Suisse for 2 years, but it was a typical hey, go find a bunch of logos, right? Go reformat a PowerPoint slide. So it's like they wasn't really learning anything. But she got really good at it. And then they moved her to the private equity group, which is to support guys like us, where, it's smaller teams, you get hopefully more interaction. And it's been a great relationship, and we've invested in her too, for sure.
But Nathan, she did have some sort of financial degree.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And in the beginning, she actually had another senior associate and a VP ahead of her reviewing her work initially before it comes to us, and now we just work with her basically directly, right? Because she doesn't need the reviewers internally. So basically, you get an associate, a senior associate, a VP, basically for that price of an associate in the U.S. or half of it, and they're supposed to do quality checks for you as well.
And interesting that while she has provided amazing value for you, you're actually moving away from that model. So the cost savings that you achieve is not worth what you give up in just the dynamic, in-person, spontaneous interactions.
100%. Remember, we hired her.
This is the remote work versus not remote
correct
work debate.
To be frank, if because we've invested in her, she's really good. Would we do it again today? Probably not. But remember, we were just starting. We didn't have a lot of fee income. We're trying to be resourceful. It made sense. Today, we've got 7 portcos. We've generated a little more fee income. We can hire talent here. I'd rather look. I don't want to do 9:30 calls at night every night, but like we did for many years. And now we're fortunate that we can hire really good people, in our office, and we've got office space now. So it's just a matter of where the firm is that we've graduated. But if anyone's starting, I would highly recommend it if you know how to use those offshore resources.
Great. Well, Nathan, speaking of those years for you, why don't you quickly go through the last 5 years, just so we have a snapshot or the audience has a snapshot of who they're hearing from here, please.
So great. I started this firm sort of at the end of 2019, early 2020 with Puneet, my partner. It's just the two of us. We did our first deal. And real quick on that, my background prior was I was in private equity for 12 years at a larger mid-cap fund out of New York. And Puneet, like you mentioned, was in the venture world, an investor, started 2 startups. So we got together late 2019, early 2020, did our first deal called Sage Tech, small carve-out. And we spent a lot of time on it, right? And so we did our first deal, and then COVID hit, lost our biggest customer. So we doubled down and spent 18 months working with management, trying to reposition the business, trying to cut costs, trying to survive, to be very, very frank. And then in the summer of 2021, we ended up doing our second platform called TTL. We had a third platform that we were about to close as well in August, but that we ended up getting ghosted by the executive leading that deal. Our exclusivity period ran off, and they signed a deal with a public company and got more money, is what it is. And then post then, we sort of revised our strategy, right? We're always revising what our North Star is for Columbia River Partners. And today, fast forward, we've got 7 platforms. We focus on what we call picks and shovels of technology. We've done 4 carve-outs. And we have a very focused lens of what deal fits today, whereas 3 years ago or 4 years, we look at everything, right? We were looking at aggregators in the Amazon space. We were looking at digital marketing. We're all over the place, to be honest, right? We were like, when you're early, you just want to get a deal done, right? Honestly. And now we've gotten to a point we have our North Star. We know what we're focused on. We've got our criteria. It's been, and we've expanded our team from 2 of us to 8 over the last 4 years.
Nathan, if you contrast the more focused sourcing that you're doing today, how does that manifest in the actual sourcing strategy? And have you seen it on the inbound side too, that there's a difference to how you operated more as a generalist before?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So one of the things when I did when I left my old prior PE firm, is we were really known as a generalist firm, middle market firm out of New York. Right. And so we try to figure out how do we not do that, right? And there's pros and cons to that. You want to have a big funnel. And so unfortunately, I started doing that when I first started CRP. I'd look at everything. And over time, as we have gotten more focused, and we've actually hired a BD person now who has helped elevate our sourcing game, but here's our lanes now. We say no a lot faster, but we actually see a lot more deals that I think are a better fit. Right, because now the market knows this is when I call Nathan and Steven at CRP. It's for a picks and shovels tech company. There's some challenge with it, right? And they're going to get the deal done, right? If it's a super nice software, super nice consumer, or whatever, we say no or not a fit. So our deal flow has sort of come down a little bit in terms of the number of deals, but I'd tell you the deals that fit in our sweet spot has gone up. But it wasn't overnight. It took us a couple of years to get to that point.
And how about tactically on your sides, on the outbound side? Initially, you would have just gotten on the email outreach list for as many intermediaries as possible. Correct. But today, how does that look?
So in the beginning, we were doing we were attending HCG, networking, calling accountants, lawyers, bankers, doing all that stuff. Just, I was out there hustling. I was doing walks with people at 7 a.m. in the morning before I dropped my kids up to school. If you look at my calendar back in 2021, I literally had walks every day. I'd go work out for 45 minutes and have a walk set up with a banker or a lawyer or an accountant, doing a lot of walks, have a happy hour, 4 o'clock or 8 o'clock, just constantly networking with the community in Seattle and Portland. And then when we brought Steven on board, I'm like, Steven, you need to help me with the sourcing, right? And he is, while I'm focusing on sort of call it the traditional investment banking channels, he's covering more of the call it directs and the broker market and the Axials and the buy side guys. So he's got his lanes that he focuses on. And today I've gone from, if I look at sort of my outbound, I do 0 outbound or very little outbound, where I was doing a ton in 2020, 2021. I was constantly hunting to everybody. Now I do 0, and Steven, that's his full-time job. And now deals come in that fit us, right? So it's been a great flip, but it took us several years to get to that point where I don't have to be as proactive. First 15 deals, I think I sourced 12 of the first 15, but now we've got our corp dev guys at the Portco sourcing deals, Steven sourcing deals, we've got buy side guys sourcing deals. So we've been able to create an ecosystem once we figured out what our lanes are, it's much easier to go source. Does that answer your question, Nicholas?
Yes, and it's much easier to source because where you go is more focused, and also because you talk the language and are easier, or it's easier for you to perceive the value in the targets that you're looking for.
Correct.
Now, let's stop a little bit on Stephen, actually. We met him in the pre-call. So you've hired a fairly senior resource here on your team to help with business development. I think this is, more advanced stage for most independent sponsors. I'm eager to learn a little bit more about that. Like, do you hire someone who's been in professional services for 3 to 5 years and is coming up on 30? Or do you like you did, someone who's probably 10, 12 years into their career, more senior? And what is senior enough? Because what you probably want here is someone who's very good at the networking game, who can really be an ambassador of your company.
Yeah.
So can you talk about the recruiting process and finding someone like Stephen and exactly what's senior enough but junior enough that it also fits your budget?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And look, if you look at our entire team, even Panine, no one has done private equity before really but me for an extended period of time, right? Steven, Dylan, Tom, Swati. So what we look for is kind of, do you have a chip on your shoulder? Are you willing to hustle? Are you not going to react to like, hey, let's have a call at 9:30 at night, right? Like, hey, and so Steven honestly didn't even know what private equity was. He was, if you look at his resume, he was selling utility rebates. He was in the cannabis industry for a while. He was all over the place, right? And I met him a number of years ago when I was invested in a cannabis company. I'm like, oh, you're pretty good at BD. And he's like, I think at some point I want you to come work for us. And he's like, Nate, I've never done private equity. At the time, he couldn't even tell you what revenue and EBITDA is, right? He couldn't tell you the difference because that's not what he did. He was a sales guy selling lighting. And if you look at Dylan and Tom, they were both, they were bankers at one point, but then they moved into corp dev or software or something. But these guys get overlooked by what I'd call traditional private equity firms because they don't have the resume or the pedigree, right? And so we see lots of those guys that want to come join us or when we recruit. But I'm looking for that, like, hey, I really want to learn what private equity is. I don't already know it, right? Number one. And two, I have a chip on my shoulder. Number two. And three, are they going to be gracious enough to be like, hey, I'm super happy you gave me a shot here. I can't thank you enough. And that's what we kind of look for. It's hard to evaluate that all the time, and we don't get it always right. But I feel like we've been very fortunate. The guys that we have hired are all like, they're just thankful to be in this environment because, once for most PE firms, once you miss the, getting in as an analyst window at an investment bank, is really hard to break in. Even I had that struggle when I was an associate in investment banking. I had one opportunity to join private equity. And they're like, you have to go now, otherwise you'll never get in. That was sort of the mantra, which I'm not sure I agree with, but that's sort of the culture that's been developed. So Steven, I said, come join us, and he's done a great job. Right now, he's not doing the traditional like go run to ACG every weekend. He's focused on the broker network, focused on direct outreach, different channels. And he's done a good job.
Nathan, take the point about what you're looking for character-wise in the hires that you make, but the cost there is all the training that you'll have to do. And
100%.
You're not a big organization where you can build this kind of training function that's in the background and you're onboarding new people and teaching them what they need to know. You're 9:30 calls to India for years. Yeah. And that was just one employee, let alone, the others. So how do you reconcile that in your own mind that folks without private equity vocabulary even are worth bringing in training?
Yeah. So Steven is like a good example. You could call Steven, and we probably had in his first year 3 to 5 phone calls over the weekends. He'll just call me up. Hey man, I had a question about what does this look like? What does that look like? Or he'll call me at 7 p.m. If I'm at dinner, I'll ignore it, but I'll pick it back up. So we have a very like Panit, Steven, and I, Tom, like, hey, call whenever you need to. And if we're busy, don't answer. Like I'm coaching or I'm at dinner or I'll text you right back. So with Steven this first year, which, he was trying to figure it out and navigate. I knew what he was good at BD. He's very good at paying it forward, right? I spent a lot of time with him on all anyone can schedule a call with anybody. We have open calendars, which is very unique for PE firms. So you can literally look at my calendar and pop on a meeting. Now, If you pop on something between 9 and 5, it's going to get rescheduled. It's just the nature of the beast, especially for me. So just, call me at 7 p.m. I'll pick up. I'm driving somewhere or whatever. And so I probably had hundreds of phone calls with Steven. And you can call him and, hey, what is carried interest? What is a management fee? What's a rollover equity? I've had many of these discussions with Steven because he's inquisitive. And so part of it's on him being inquisitive. Part of it's on Pete and I spending the time to teach him. And I don't mind that. We have interns every summer. We have 2 to 3 interns every summer. It's more work for us, honestly, but we do that because we want to pay it forward.
On kind of breaking into PE, Nathan, let's pivot a little bit to breaking into independent sponsor land. And we had a conversation around first-time sponsors. So one of the things that you're hearing, I guess, from capital providers is that first-time sponsors or sponsors maybe broadly aren't doing the homework. That was actually something that you said differentiated Columbia River, that you do the homework. Say more about that, and then we'll go from there.
Let's be honest. I fell in this by accident. It wasn't like my goal was to go build CRP as an independent sponsor. I'd left my PE firm, I had to go figure it out, kind of deal done, figuring out where to go next. And we sort of built this. I didn't have like a 5-year plan. My plan was, well, can I give myself a job, right? Can I get a deal done, right? It was very simple. And what's happened is over the last 5 years, this if you asked me 3.5 years ago, I would have said, I have to go raise a fund. Now I'm not so sure. And we're still having that debate internally, and we're going to be punted on that till the end of the year. But in terms of independent sponsors, what we're seeing is there's been an overwhelming amount of interest of guys wanting to jump into it, from the capital side, from the investment banking side, from guys at the private equity world. I mean, just this last week alone, I think I've had three seasoned plus 10-year PE guys at $2 to $4 billion AUM funds saying, hey, Nate, I really want to do what you're doing and be an independent sponsor. And I'm like, really? And so my advice to them is the following, right? Don't do it yourself, right? It's a lonely world as it is. So try to find a partner. And 2, it's going to take about 2 years on average to finally get to a point where you feel like you've actually made it, right? Where you got enough fee income coming in, you got your first deal done, there's enough EBITDA there to pay you a management fee. So have 2 years of runway. And unfortunately, I've seen a bunch of guys never get there, and we talk to them all the time, try to be supportive. And so I don't know if I answered your question, Will, but that's sort of the feedback and the messaging that we give people.
Nathan, unpack more, if you would, what the early years and costs look like for somebody wanting to break in.
Look, I can only reference sort of us as a data point and my prior P from the larger fund, right? So what I tell people is, hey, you're going to have, there's opportunity costs. So you're not making money. And a lot of people don't understand that. They're like, who's going to pay for me while I go find a business? Oh my God, there's nobody paying you. Like, you need to go out and fund yourself, going to conferences, going to dinners, going to networking thing. Then it is painful when you have to pay the bill. And you're like, crap, is that banker going to pay the bill, or am I going to pay the bill? And you're like, who's going to put that credit card down? Trust me, I've been through it. It's painful, but it's part of the nature of the beast of starting your own firm. And so I tell people, like, look, it's about 2 years from start to finish in terms of, you have to give it 2 years to go find your first deal. Maybe you get a second deal done too. You're going to have to, hopefully by the end of year 2, you're starting to take some management fees. Every deal that I've done, there's always a requirement for me to personally invest some money, right? Relative to your net worth, if you have a net worth. And so my rule of thumb is, be ready to spend up to, $300,000, $500,000, right? And well, that's a lot of money. That includes capital you have to deploy in each deal. It includes if there's a broken deal cost. Like we've had one broken deal cost that cost us quite a bit of money, a couple $100,000, and it's hard to manage the partners with the vendors. You don't want to treat them too unfairly because they did the work. And so you try to find ways to share costs. And so to me, it's sort of like 2 years where you start collecting some fee income. And then you have to decide, do you take it out yourself or do you reinvest it back in the business? We decided to reinvest it back in CRP and hire a Steven or a Tom or whomever. And then it's really another year or two later where you think you've kind of like made it and you've recouped all that opportunity costs and the dollars you've invested. Like today, I can say, in year 5.5 now that, hey, we feel pretty good. We have enough fee income coming in from the 7 portfolios that we don't feel stressed about hiring a team of 6 other individuals, or if we deal with a broken deal cost, right? Like, hey, we can stomach a $300,000 loss. I don't want to. Don't get me wrong, but we can stomach, like, if a deal breaks, we want to make our providers, our partners, feel like we're not taking advantage of them, and that but we'll share in some of the pain. So hopefully, will that answer your question?
It does, but just to be clear, really, really what the threshold is of kind of making a comfortable living is not time in game, it's platform acquisitions completed.
Correct.
And it sounds like it's more like at 2 platforms. The first one, you get some fees, and maybe you take them for yourself, but to really grow your organization, you're probably going to want to reinvest those. It's really at acquisition number 2 where you are paying yourself and have the makings of a firm.
Well, I think it depends on the size of the first. Our first platform was small. We're small, sure. Right? And we also discounted economics to some degree, like, because we were just trying to get the deal done, right? So it was a small deal, $20 million check cumulative, all right. And we just wanted to, we didn't want to be aggressive on the carry structure. And again, this is back in 2019, 2020. The market's matured very fast in the last 5 years. So I think today, someone with a first deal, I think they should get better economics than we did on our first deal, right? Just so we're clear. So you could probably take a higher management fee if there's EBITDA. We definitely, on our first 2 deals, probably took, not worse economics, but probably below market economics where it is today. But I'm okay with that because it was 2019, 2020, 2021. We were just trying to figure it out. Wanted to get, our data, get on the map. But if you can today, I think the first time I think you can get slightly better economics that you may not need a second deal to survive, I guess, right? If that makes sense. So it's just the market's evolved.
But still, the point remains that doing your very first deal, you might get better economics than you guys got back in 2019, but you might still have to give up a little bit of economics
100%.
To get your first deal done because you're a rookie. And actually,
100%.
on that point, Nathan, we talked about a very kind of informal kind of concept of a chaperone. You've had a couple capital providers reach out to you saying, hey, there's this first-time sponsor. We like the deal, but they just seem a little inexperienced. Maybe you can involve yourself. Talk to us about that model.
So often, it's been a more recent phenomenon where we've had capital providers come to us, say, look, we've got an independent sponsor, typically a single person, that may or may not have done private equity, but they've done consulting or banking or ops. They're like, look, we think we'd love for you guys, for CRP, to partner with that person to go do the investment. And so this goes back to when people ask me, hey, what are the 2 things you advise? I say, 1, it takes 2 years. 2, find a partner. Hopefully that partner has got a complementary skill set. If you're a consultant or a banker, go get a PE guy. If you're a PE guy, go get an operating partner, right? And so often what we're seeing is there's a lot of people jumping into being an independent sponsor, and some of the more experienced capital providers that have been doing this for a long time have realized, it's not just underwriting the deal, right? The deal itself and the merits of the deal. It could be a great deal, but they also are now, some of them, not all of them, are underwriting the independent sponsor. Can this person, deal with a difficult situation? We just went through a very difficult litigation with a founder, and the capital partners are very happy with how we behaved. We took the ball, we took the lead. We dealt with the counsel, dealt with the seller. We resolved it. It was an 18-month pain in the ass settlement that we got done. But those investors are very happy with how we behaved and kept them updated. But that comes from me having done this for many years, having had other challenge portcos. So we're seeing this uptick of seasoned capital investors and independent sponsors saying, hey, Nate, would you be interested in taking a lead chair or co-lead or a second chair with other sponsors? We haven't done it yet because we haven't figured out, does the math work? Has to be the right fit. But we're seeing more, we've been asked more and more about doing that.
And if a first-time sponsor wanted to work with Columbia River or a more established firm, what should they kind of expect in terms of giving up economics?
It's a great question. They have to think about what is the alternative for us. So we could go do a deal, a partnership with first an independent sponsor, and they'll say, I want, half the economics or whatever. And we try to think about, well, how about, if you're one guy, we're 2 partners, but we have all these resources, is a 1/3, 2/3 a fair split, which you get to leverage our resources. We think that's fair. they may say it's not enough, and that's okay. So we'll tell them, like, you have to decide, because the alternative for us is to go do another deal ourselves.
Yeah.
And get all the economics. So we want to be, right? We have to find we have to find our own balance. The other big challenge is broken deal costs. Like, who covers the broken deals? Sometimes the capital providers will do it, but sometimes they want us to do it, right? And so we try to share that 2/3, 1/3, or whatever the split is in the economics. And so it's and it depends on the person and how experienced they are, where they are in life, what kind of resources they have. But we also look at it, what is the opportunity cost to us? So we haven't done it yet. We've explored a few, haven't gotten to the finish line. We may with one or two folks that we trust that we will work with, but we are seeing more and more inbounds for that, and we're trying to figure it out.
Let's pivot a little bit, Nathan, to another line that you shared in our pre-call that we liked. You are not founder friendly.
So let me rephrase that. Having done this for almost 20 years, a lot of PE firms say, hey, we're founder-friendly, partner choice, and that's great. And what I meant is founders are awesome. They've often built businesses from 0 to 20, particularly family-owned founders, right? And what we want to do is part of when we onboard, and look, we've evolved this process. When we onboard a new company, one of the first things we do with the founder is, hey, do you want to be CEO? And often they say yes. Great. As a CEO, here are the things you're responsible for. And we have them write a CEO vision and then draft a CEO scorecard. One of the things on that scorecard, which is what they have to be responsible for, is stakeholder management. You gotta figure out how you're gonna manage the board dynamic, the lender, the private equity firm, maybe there's co-investors, customers, vendors. You can no longer just manage for yourself and your bank balance sheet, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But now you've taken money, you've taken a liquidity event, right? And we just want to have an honest conversation that, hey, we're all going to step up here, right? And often what we've learned is some founders are able to make that transition to a CEO, but it's often rare. I'd say it's probably one out of four. And so we are often having difficult discussions with these founders. Like, look, we've had some voluntarily come to us and say, hey, look, you're right, Nate. It's a lot of work being a CEO. Like, it's more than I thought. I got to deal with this, and let's go hire someone. Other times they don't want to have that difficult discussion. So we have to have that difficult discussion and say, hey, look, I think it's time. And I'm not saying we're going to get it always right. The other thing that is interesting is you don't know how a founder is going to react once that wire clears and they get that money. At my prior firm, we had a founder who was like, hey, I'm going to be here. I love this business. I'm going to be the CEO. Wire cleared, got an 8-figure check. And then the next day he went off to I think it was the Middle East for 60 days. I'm like, what are you doing? You got to get back to the headquarters and help us build this thing. No, I can work from my phone. That's not the deal. And so founders add a ton of value. Idea generation, understanding what the market dynamics are, starting this thing. There's a lot of value. But to go from 0 to 20, great or whatever, but then from 20 to 100, it may take a different skill set. So I'm not saying we're not founder friendly, but we're going to challenge founders. Are they ready to take the next step of being that CEO? And we haven't gotten it right, just so we're clear. We've evolved over time, but we are willing to have those conversations earlier with founders. Whereas a lot of other firms are like, we're founder friendly, but then things don't go well. And then they get into a debate or a discussion or an argument. And so we just try to be transparent of who we are.
Yeah, no, it's such a great way to lay it out. And in some ways, what you're saying is you're going to have bosses now. You use the word stakeholders, but it's really more like you're going from being king to being, an employee. Leadership and employee.
Every public company CEO has to report to their board and their shareholders and their right. And like we all do to some degree, I have to report to my investors, right? Because I took their capital, right? So you've just took a bunch of capital, and there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I'm not the guy to be CEO.
Right.
But
it's being as upfront about that as possible.
Yeah, and we tell people our goal is to take you from here to here, and our goal is to take that whatever you rolled over, we want to make that worth more than the money that you took out the first time. Very simple goals. That's what we tell people. But you may not be the person to help get us there, and that's okay. But let us, let us figure out how to do this. And we feel like we've done that now with our track record at CRP. We've done it a number of times, and we're having some good success. That we can go back to that.
And I think what you've learned is that you said that 3 out of 4 times it doesn't work out with the founder continuing because it's a different skill set. And since you've learned that by now, you're actually addressing it before you even close. And so you're not saying you're founder unfriendly. You're just saying we're not expecting status quo, which many people think is the case when they hear the term founder friendly. In fact, you can argue you're more founder friendly than others because you're proactively honest with them.
Yeah. We had one portfolio company, the founder, he was one of the CEO. 3 months, he's like, Nate, you're 100% right. This is a lot of work. I love what you're doing, but I'm not the guy. And he came to us. It was great. And then the next day we kicked off a search, and now we have a new CEO. And he's like, Nate, that was the best thing you did was bring on a CEO. And we've already, on paper, we haven't exited, his rollover is worth way more than what he took out of close. So that's a good thing.
Skipping back 10 minutes in our conversation, you said that you had a deal, I think it was your second or third deal back in 2021-ish, where you had been ghosted by the seller. Your LOI lapsed and then you never heard back from him. Looking back at the deal, what were some of the warning signs or things to be on the lookout for? What are perhaps some things you could have done differently? Curious to unpack that one a little bit more.
So we've had 2 difficult situations. One, before we even got our second deal done. So after our first deal was done, we had another deal where we partnered up with a traditional private equity firm. Lesson number 1, do not take money from anybody that is not actively marketing they support independent sponsors. If they are a traditional PE firm. And by that, I mean, we found a platformer, put together a thesis, found a platform, found a CEO, found a board member, partnered with a traditional PE firm that does direct deals, but we did not know the head of the investment committee. And ultimately, when we got to almost closing, the head of the committee was like, hey, why do we need Nathan and CRP? Let's just do it without them. And so we get the phone call saying, hey, you guys are out. Very odd. I won't lie to everybody. My partner will tell you, it put a sour on me. I was sour for like a year. I'm like, what the hell? Why do people? And this is a multi-billion-dollar fund that has plenty of money, right? And for them to do that to us was sort of like, wow, like they have plenty of money. They've already made plenty of money. I think it was an ego thing for the head of the committee. Like, why do this? So number 1 is we tell people, take money from people that are actively supporting other independent sponsors, or it's on their website. It's interesting. I've gotten more phone calls from traditional PE firms that want to invest in independent sponsors. I'm like, great. I don't see it on your website. I had 2 this week, actually. I don't see you supporting independent on your website. Like, how do I know I'm not going to get? And we don't have the money to go sue somebody, right, for the agreement. So, and that's not. We don't want to waste our time suing people for not honoring their agreement. So, if you're going to support independent sponsors, I tell people, take money from people that are very active in the space. Like,
and Nathan, to be clear, why that they say very publicly or on their website that there's messaging around independent sponsors, signals. Why is them being in the ecosystem so deeply important, and why is that a signal that they'll treat you right?
Well, because it's the community. Unlike the communities, independent sponsors, from what I've learned, can connect way more with each other to help each other out. Like, who's the good capital partner, who is not, than traditional PE firms. Remember, they already have their committed capital. So I have a cohort of 7 to 8 other independent sponsors that have all seasoned by now that we share or talk about what LP is a good LP, what's a good investor, who is who's going to treat us fairly, and so we want to pay it forward. Like, go do that, right? So, and so there are now more and more firms that are backing independent sponsors publicly. It was sort of a dirty word 10 years ago. Now there's dedicated funds for independent sponsors. There's LPs now are building for independent sponsors. So focus on those guys because they're going to treat you with hopefully fair economics.
Because they're committed to the ecosystem, an ecosystem that talks to itself a lot.
Correct.
And so it'll be a way of knowing that their reputation is something they value in this
world. Right, exactly. Yeah. They show up to the McGuire Woods conference or the iGlobal conferences. Like, if you're going to do a one-off deal and never show up to those conferences, then I'm going to be a little worried about taking money from you. Because what we don't want is, here's the issue. Let's say you get a deal, it's an independent sponsor, you get a deal under LOI. You get a deal under LOI, and now you're running around to find the capital. And then you sign up with the PE firm, and then you have a memorandum of understanding with that PE firm in economics. There's nothing stopping that guy at the on the 9th hour or the day before closing, changing it. That literally happened to us, right? Like the guy's like, maybe we'll give you, I think he said like 5% of what we've agreed to. I'm like, what?
Wow.
And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. It's like, yeah, well, our head of our community doesn't think we need you guys anymore. I'm like, okay, did you not know the work we put into this thing? So they don't care if they do another deal with an independent sponsor because they're a direct PE firm. So that's why I'm very clear. If you're gonna like there's enough capital now out there that support independent sponsors at market terms. Go find it. It's out there.
Okay.
Maybe 10 years ago it's different, but there's enough guys there. So the deal that you're talking about, Nicholas, that was more of we were dealing with a situation where I think we were under exclusivity with the seller, and they probably got an inbound from somebody else at significantly higher cash than we were going to give. So they stalled us, and then they took that deal. You know, we could argue the merits of it, why they did what they did. It was part of I think what I would ask is, hey, call me and tell me that. Hey, right? Like, this is what we got. You're supposed to disclose if you get a competing offer. They didn't. They waited for the exclusivity period to wear it out, and then they went to the other offer. Look, it's the nature of the beast. It happens. It sucks, but you got to move on unless.
Yeah, no, so that's a pretty straightforward situation. They just got another unsolicited inbound offer, and it was much, much better than yours. The right thing to do would be to communicate it and give you a chance to match it. But in this case, they let it lapse. The fallout from your side is, of course, the lost opportunity. Yeah. But did you have to wait a long time to learn what actually happened, or did they eventually communicate?
Well, they ultimately sold to a public company, and so we could figure out we figured out what they would pay, what was paid. It was definitely 50% more cash than we offered. Pure economics, I can't argue with them, but we did sign an LOI. We did negotiate the purchase agreement. We did call all our capital. So we were ready to close. Oh. And then they just got this offer, in a 10-day span before our exclusivity expired, and they wanted to take it.
In a situation like that, do you recommend just, throwing your hands in the air and say, we give up? It's a large public strategic with 50% more cash, or is there anything you can do to savor the deal?
Look, I think it depends on the dynamic of the seller, right? Like, part of we're selling is we're good guys. We're going to help create value for you, your rollover. I think on this one, there were some shareholders that we did not meet that wanted full liquidity. And if they're looking at this as like, hey, I'm out. And it was a multiple shareholders. And so we don't. There were many shareholders because of the way it was set up. Some had been in there for a long time, and we did have some rollover. So I don't blame them in that one. Of, hey, like, I want to go do something different. I want to get full liquidity out, and I get 50% more. Yeah. So this is why I say it takes 2 years, right? It takes 2 years. You got to have some capital in the bank because stuff happens that you cannot predict. I mean. Those two incidents that we've had, the one where we got cut out last minute and one where the offer went somewhere else, I'm not as peeved by the second one where we got, the guy went for a bigger offer. Look, it's economics. But the first one, look, that definitely scarred us for a while. Like, okay, it definitely changed our thinking of working with traditional private equity firms, which continues to spend more time trying to get independent sponsor deal flow, right? So we're very careful when we get lots of inbound calls from PE firms for deals like, hey, we're very transparent. We don't want to get cut out. We're going to do all the work. Do the economics make sense? And do you promote it on your website that you support independent sponsors? And very few do, but most don't.
You're also not the first guest we've had, Nathan, who's had a deal yanked out from under them. Neil Doshi has a equally devastating story of a deal that same sort of thing happened. Great point to be focused on capital providers who are really entrenched in the ecosystem. On the other hand, there is a lot of capital, as we constantly hear, as you've said, coming into the ecosystem, and maybe some of that new capital intends to stick around and are good actors. What are some of the reasons you see for all of this new capital, come flooding, maybe is an overstatement, into the space, other than return profiles? There's kind of qualitative reasons you've pointed out.
Yeah, look, it's a great question. I keep trying to figure it out myself, to be honest with you. I think there's a couple things happening. One is in a traditional fund, you have a 10-year lockup, you pay 2%, and it's a flat carry, right? You get 20% on the gain. In our models, there's no 2% fee. You're closer to the deal as the capital provider, And often you have tiered carry economics, right? The more you perform, the more carry you get. So I think those dynamics are interesting. I mean, it's not that different. There's a lot of capital chasing independent sponsors and a lot of capital chasing continuation vehicles. Both do the same thing for the investor, which is they get to see the asset first or the deal first before they invest. Mm-hmm. Whereas in a fund, it's you give a guy a commitment and you're locked up for 10 years. And who knows if they follow the investment profile they said they would, or do they do something crazy because they got to deploy the capital fast before the clock runs out. Yeah. So I think there is a fair amount of investor interest in being a little bit closer to the asset and seeing it before they write the check. And the two ways are right now, what I'm seeing is independent sponsors and continuation vehicles.
You'd also talked about there kind of being an appetite for people at some of these capital providers, maybe at family offices in particular, just having an attraction to the action, wanting to be closer. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, look, I think it's again being closer to the deal, right? They want to. I think a lot of family offices and institutions are building direct investment arms, right? And at some point, maybe they're using us as a way to do their own deals, right? And so at least this way, they can be, learn from the independent sponsor community, how they find deals, how they structure deals, how they do due diligence, where you don't get as much of that when you're committed to a fund, right? They don't share as much unless you're co-investing on the side. So I think there's a lot of folks at these family offices, which is great, that want to support us. Maybe they want to learn themselves and go out on their own. So I think there's this nature I'm seeing across the board that people want to get closer to seeing the asset, right? The actual deal itself, mm-hmm. right? Versus like, do I just write $10 million to, a middle market fund and who knows what they invest in and I get the quarterly updates? Or you know what, I'm going to hire a resource, maybe it costs me more internally at the family office, but now there's accountability of how is that deal doing? Did you pick the right independent sponsor deal or not? So I think there's more of that going on and increased accountability and visibility in deals.
There is also something to be said about the legitimacy and the risk or perceived risk delta between independent sponsors and other asset classes coming down. Could you explain what you meant by that?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things. One is I think there's the alignment of economic interests are more aligned with independent sponsors, right? Yeah, right. The independent sponsors are not charging a 2% management fee. We have to fund it ourselves or out of the portcos, number one. And two, the carry is tiered, right? And two, there is this risk of, it's being closer to the deal, right? So depending on what the LP's appetite is, right? Hey, do I want to have a safe, sound, sleep at night? I'm not saying it's an easier job, but I can get the allocation to put $100 million in a Blackstone. Go do that. No one's going to fire you for putting $100 million in a Blackstone, right? But hey, I really want to make my, and I'm not saying it's not interesting. It's different. It's an allocation game. But there are some folks that want to be like, I really want to be, in the deal mix, in the hunt, right? As we've seen. And so they're like, look, instead of doing $100 million in a Blackstone, I'll do 10 deals of independent sponsors and put $10 million in 10. But there's more risk. Hopefully there's more return too with it. But then they get to be closer to the asset, I guess more in the action, I guess. I've heard that from some LPs, like this is why they're doing it, for a combination of hopefully higher returns, but there's more risk, right? You don't get more returns without more risk. It's just
right. So your point is just that allocators are sticking their necks out when they're investing in independent sponsors because it's a less proven asset class versus putting it into Blackstone, for instance. But I think you're also saying that they're sticking their neck out less now than what was the case 5 or 10 years ago.
Right. I mean, I don't know about putting their neck out, but I think they're willing to take more risk for more return, which they can get in the independent sponsor world on a deal-by-deal basis, right? Versus putting it in a Blackstone fund. Again, I don't know Blackstone's returns. I'm sure they're fantastic, but I'm sure they've stabilized over the last 25 years, right? They're going to be 2.5 times where maybe you can get cash on cash, whereas hopefully you can get it 4 or 5 times with an independent sponsor, right? And I think that's the risk, that's the calculation that they're making internally.
Is 4 to 5 times what you expect of your deals or what you anecdotally see among your peers?
I think 3 to 5 times I think is fair, right? We're trying to be like my old firm, we were at the funded firm, we were more like 2 to 3. So in my view, we should be a little bit higher than that. right, sort of closer to 3 to 5 in terms of cash on cash. Not that we're going to get there, but that's the goal.
Excellent.
Nathan, we got you for a few more minutes, and there's a couple topics that we still want to hit. The first is the evolution of Columbia River. So you talked about how when you first started, it was just, how can I get a job? How can I get my first deal to get a job? And obviously that you were successful with that. The firm has flourished, and the vision evolves. And so your vision has evolved in terms of strategy, the industry. You now have your North Star. We're going to turn to that in a second. But let's just first talk about the entity itself, continuing to be deal by deal versus raising a fund. Successful independent sponsors are always asking themselves this, it seems. How do you think about that question?
It's a great question that we've punted until we really have our first exit, right? Because we know if you're going to go raise a fund, you're going to have an exit, and you're going to have an anchor LP. That's kind of what every placement agent has basically told us if we want to go raise a fund. So one thing that we learned is we were fielding too many questions and placement agents reaching out to us that it was distracting us from our core of building good portfolio companies, right? And so what we've said to ourselves is we're going to wait till the end of 2025 and maybe Q1 of 2026. Let's not even deal with it. Let's not even deal with the question of are we raising a fund or not, because it was consuming some of our time back in 2023 and early 2024. And so we said, let's just take that off the table. Let's get our portfolio and our team motivated, incentivized, doing the right thing. So that's number one. I think long term, though, one of the things why you raise a fund is you hire more talent at the private equity level, right? And two, do you eventually want to create enterprise value at the PE firm? Like you sell part of the GP. Today, I can't sell Columbia River Partners to anybody, but I'm okay with that in the current form that we're doing. I think we're doing fine. But if that's important to you, then yes, you got to go raise a fund, get the management fees, get all that stuff, and we're just not there yet.
What about the question of talent retention? And by the way, you're not the first to say this, so it's an interesting, if you would.
Yeah, and so look, we've hired guys who are great. And again, we look for the chip on the shoulder. They're getting overlooked by the traditional PE firms. And I've told our guys, you guys should be partners with us in 3-5 years, right? And if we're scaling. If we're not, you should be doing your own deals, and we will happily support you and do that, right? If you come to me in 2 years, and I want to do something different, as long as you've given us, I'll give you a perfect example. Nick Cannon, great guy, was one of our senior associates, worked for us for 2 years, and hired him, chip off the shoulder. Didn't have the pedigree that a lot of traditional firms would want, but he worked his ass off for us. Great guy. Comes to me and says, Nate, I really want to go back into corp dev. I'm like, okay, why? I really want to focus on building one company, because he was a corp dev guy before this, right? He was a lender, corp dev, private equity, back in corp dev. So I said, Nick, we're going to help you. And he had to actually end up going to work for corp dev in one of our portcos, and he's loving it and he's thriving. So, but he gave us a great 2 years of solid effort, worked his ass off. And so I told these guys, look, if you guys want to be a partner here, great, tell us. Show us, and then we'll create a roadmap for that and what it could look like. If you want to go do your own deal, we'll help you do that too. If you want to go into corp dev again, we'll do that too. As long as you've put in the effort for us, we will return it in whatever you want to do, right? And that goes back to the point of if someone comes here and they're stuck here for 10 years and they're not a partner, then we've fired the wrong person. We want someone to be hungry to go build for themselves, whether it's here or somewhere else. That's how we think about it.
So as we close out, let's just hear more about the strategy. We've left your whole industry focus here to the end, but obviously it's important. You talked about how you now are dialed in to the picks and shovels of technology, which I'll ask you what that means. First question, this dialing in on an industry, with how much intention did you do that? Was it just because those were the deals that you had closed, and so you woke up one morning and you were in that industry? Or was it no, we should narrow down into an industry, and we love this industry? Obviously, you're going to say you love the industry, but you see what I'm getting at. Did you back into it, or did you go after it?
We 100% backed into it. Let's not. Okay. So look, there's another firm in town, very successful independent sponsor, Westwood Partners, very successful. They've taken a geography approach. They do Oregon, Washington, Alaska, I think maybe Idaho. Great team, done 20 deals, very successful. And so they've took the geography approach. We thought about doing geography, but they both grew up here. They're from here. They've got a huge network. We weren't sure we could compete with that, right? And so then we did our first deal. It was a carve-out of a company in the drone space in bankruptcy. So we looked at a lot of bankruptcy deals after that, realized that's too hard. It's too complicated, right? Then we looked at a lot of drones. The problem with drones, it's a lot of high, crazy valuations at the time, right? So we're like, all right, that's out. So then we're like, wait, what do we do next? So then we did CTL, which was a Chromebook provisioning distribution business. And then we did Custom Computer Specialists, which was a company that sells hardware, software, and manages IT networks for schools. Like, okay. So and then we did Teeny Fiber, which manufactures fiber optic cables. So now we have 7 platforms. Every platform is now working with another portco. So for example, Teeny Fiber, which manufactures fiber optic cables, is a vendor to Custom Computer Specialists. Vault, our latest platform that provisions devices for communications and security devices, they sell new devices, but they get some old devices back. They take those old devices and they send it to other portco, CTL, which is in the e-waste market. So they have a commercial relationship. So that's what we call picks and shovels. So we don't do software, we don't do venture, don't do growth equity. It's manufacturing fiber optics, installing IT networks, delivering hardware and software. And so that's sort of the picks and shovels concept. The other criteria is we talked to owners and founders or whomever. Can your portco find a symbiotic relationship can your company find a symbiotic relationship with another portco in our portfolio? It's got to be arm's length because, right, we have different investor bases and we want each CEO to create value for themselves. So it doesn't work every time. But when Teeny Fiber became a vendor to Custom, we just made the intro and then we stayed out of the economic arrangement. Like those two CEOs got to figure it out. And so those are part of what we call the CRP flywheel. So when we see deals now, like one of the first questions we ask is, hey, can that company benefit from one of our other portcos in some form or fashion? And it sells to owners, sells to bankers. We can use them to help diligence the target. So that's part of the thing that we're doing that's allowed us to kind of create some scale and makes it easier for us to find deals. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But it was by accident. It wasn't like I started this in 2020. Like we literally looked at so many bankruptcy companies and so many drone companies, and we're like, wait a second, this is not going to work. So we've had to pivot 3 or 4 times, and now the last 2.5 years, we feel like we've got our North Star defined.
And that you had done 4 carve-outs. That seems like a pretty high proportion in the carve-out field. How do you come across these opportunities, and why are you particularly prone to succeeding with carve-outs versus other sponsors?
I think we learned the hard way. Our first deal was a carve-out in bankruptcy, so we learned the hard way, right? And we had to set up ERP, IT, benefits, payroll, all on day one. And so that was a learning process. And I'm not saying we got it all right. Luckily, we had a good management team to support us. And then over the years, we keep getting more carve-outs thrown at us because we've done 4 carve-outs. So it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy between the carve-outs and then the picks and shovels of tech. So this latest deal was a carve-out in the picks and shovels of technology, relatively small deal. And now, when we talk to guys in the carve-out world, and we say we've done 4 carve-outs, or they're like, so they know we can set up an ERP system. We know they can set up an IT infrastructure. We know they can set up PEOs and benefits and insurance, right? They're like, okay, you guys know how to do it, right? And that is just as much value as the dollars that close to the seller, right? They're both meaningfully valuable. So again, it wasn't something that we started with, Nicholas. It wasn't like we're going to have a carve-out shop. Really, the driver is picks and shovels of tech. That's the driver, that industry. But we'll look at assets that are founder-owned, carve-out, orphan. I'm not sure bankruptcy anymore because it's too complex. There's too much risk in bankruptcy deals. But that's the driver, and then we have different flavors of transactions underneath that picks and shovels of technology.
Nathan, will you be at McGuire Woods here in 5 or 6 weeks?
I will be at McGuire Woods in the zoo. Yes.
In the zoo. Okay. Well, we'll be eager to meet you in person. That'll be a lot of fun. We really appreciate your time today, Nathan Chandrasekaran of Columbia River Partners. We really appreciate it. Great conversation.
I appreciate it, guys.
Hope you enjoyed that interview. For more like it, subscribe to Meeting Other Minds wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also watch us on YouTube. And check out Minds Capital, where Nicholas and I are partners alongside Max Lummis. Minds Capital invests equity in independent sponsor deals. So if you're a sponsor with a deal under LOI, please visit mindscapital.co to start a conversation. There's also an investor tab on our website with information about partnership opportunities and future fundraises. See you in the next episode.